Billionaire promises to care for Butler's granddaughter and freezes when she tells him 4 words. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The air in the Luther Grand Ballroom was thin with the weight of money. It smelled of ozone, vintage Dom Perignon, and the expensive perfume of women who treated monogamy as a seasonal suggestion. For Marcus Luther, 26, the air was suffocating. He stood on a private balcony above the fray, a young, restless king surveying his domain. His shoulders were wire-taut beneath his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. Below, the Luther Enterprises annual gala, the apex event of the Manhattan social calendar, swirled in a blur of silk and capped teeth. Marcus didn't care about the party. He cared about the man near the oyster bar, Hideki Tanaka. Tanaka's vote on Monday would decide the Atlas Dynamics acquisition. Marcus needed Atlas. His jaw locked. He scanned the room, his steel-gray eyes missing nothing. They passed over bankers, senators, and the inevitable socialite he dismissed last week. And then his eyes landed on Gilbert Smith. Gilbert, in his late 70s, stood near the service entrance. Even with his spine bowed by the illness consuming him, his butler's tuxedo was immaculate. Gilbert was more than a butler. He was the only constant in Marcus's life, the man who had raised him when his parents, in their hurry to get to Aspen, had chosen the wrong jet in an ice storm. Marcus felt a rare, uncomfortable prick of guilt. Gilbert should be home, resting, not here, insisting on overseeing his final gala. Beside Gilbert, gesturing with a linen napkin, was a young woman. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Her. Sophie Smith, 24, the granddaughter. He viewed her as an infection, a soft-spoken, sad-eyed, aspiring artist who had for the last 6 months burrowed herself into Gilbert's Manhattan apartment like a termite. She was everything he despised: poverty, pretension, and above all, the weakness of dependence. She was, to his analytical mind, a simple equation. Amelia 2.0. Amelia, the name alone was like ground glass in his gut. His ex-fiancée, the social climber who had perfected the art of crying pretty, the woman he'd caught texting her cousin, who was in fact a middle-aged real estate broker, about landing the Luther heir. He watched Sophie laugh at something Gilbert said. She was in the stark black uniform of the catering staff, a silver tray balanced on one hand. The sight of her working his event, serving drinks to his guests, felt like a specific kind of invasion. He descended the marble staircase, his sharp movement causing conversations to pause and restart in his wake. Sophie had just handed off a champagne flute when she felt a shadow fall over her. "Shouldn't you be at home, Miss Smith?" Marcus Luther's voice was low, clipped, and as cold as the marble beneath her feet. Sophie stiffened. She turned slowly. Being near Marcus Luther was like being near a very expensive, caged animal. He radiated a dangerous, nervous energy. "Mr. Luther," she said, her voice professional, but her heart was hammering. "Grandpa wanted to come, and I wanted to make sure he was all right. Does he pay you well to be his nanny, or is this just as close as you get to people who actually matter?" The blood drained from Sophie's face. She could feel the eyes of a nearby senator on them. "Excuse me?" "I see you," he murmured, taking a nearly imperceptible step closer. The scent of his expensive soap and scotch invaded her space. "I know exactly what you are. I've seen this play before. You hover, playing the part of the devoted granddaughter, just waiting for the old man's guilt to kick in so he revises a will." Each word was a calculated slap. "Gilbert is sick," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "He doesn't need a leech pretending to be an artist. He needs rest, But you don't care about that, do you? Not when there's a party to crash." Anger, hot and sharp, pierced Sophie's shock. How dare he? This man who knows nothing of the nights she held the bowl for Gilbert to be sick from the chemo, who knows nothing of the stacked medical bills she was desperately trying to pay? "You don't know anything about me," she hissed. "I know you're a distraction my butler can't afford. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a deal to close. Try not to steal the silver on your way out." He turned, dismissing her as if she were a piece of trash on his ballroom floor. Sophie stood there trembling, her humiliation as public as the chandeliers above. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. Instead, she took another champagne flute from a passing tray and went back to work, her face a mask of icy neutrality while her insides burned. An hour later, Marcus's deal was souring. Hideki Tanaka wasn't biting. He seemed more interested in the mediocre lounge singer who was cooing a lifeless version of Fly Me to the Moon. Marcus, frustrated and still simmering from his encounter with Sophie, had an idea. A cruel, impulsive idea, born of arrogance and the need to reassert control. When the singer finished her set to lukewarm applause, Marcus strode onto the stage. He took the microphone from its stand, the abrupt motion causing a sharp feedback squeal. The ballroom fell silent. "Thank you, Cynthia, for that performance," Marcus said, his voice ringing with CEO-level authority. The crowd tittered dutifully. "We're lucky enough tonight," he continued, his gray eyes scanning the crowd, "to have a special celebrity in our midst." He searched, and he found. Sophie was near the bar, refilling olive jars. "The granddaughter of our very own Gilbert Smith, Sophie." Sophie froze. Every head in the room swiveled toward her. Gilbert, across the room, looked confused. "Mr. Lutter," Sophie started, shaking her head. "She's a singer, I'm told," Marcus spoke over her, a thin, cruel smile playing on his lips. He was enjoying this. He was exposing the fraud. "She'll sing badly. She'll squeak out some pathetic pop song. The crowd will laugh, and the small, irritating thorn in my side will be permanently removed. She will never dare show her face in my home again. Why don't you show us, Sophie?" he invited, the microphone held out like a weapon. "Give us a song. Show us all what you can do. Or do you only perform when the rent is due?" The humiliation from before was nothing compared to this. This was a public execution. Sophie looked at Gilbert. Her grandfather looked small and pale, shrinking in his suit. He was being humiliated through her. And just like that, Sophie's fear evaporated, replaced by an ice-cold fury. She dropped the olive jar on the bar with a dull thud. She walked toward the stage, not hurried, not defeated. She walked with the kind of dignity Marcus, with all his money, could never buy. The silence in the ballroom was so thick it felt like it could choke. She walked up the 2 steps. She didn't grab the mic from his hand. She stared him down, her brown eyes blazing, and waited for him to hand it to her. Annoyed, he did. Sophie turned to the band. The pianist, an older man with kind eyes, looked terrified. "Do you know I'd rather go blind?" she asked, her voice low but clear over the mic. The pianist nodded, surprised. "In E-flat. Just follow me." Marcus crossed his arms, the smirk still on his face, ready for the crash. Sophie closed her eyes for 1 second. She breathed in. She didn't think about the bankers or the socialites or the man who wanted to destroy her. She thought about Gilbert. The piano intro began hesitant, and then Sophie opened her mouth and sang. "Something told me it was over when I saw you and her talking." It was not the voice of an aspiring anything. It was a weapon. It was a voice soaked in bourbon and heartache, in late nights and broken trust. It was raw, powerful, and so full of soul it hit the room like a physical shock wave. A fork clattered, conversations died. By the second line, the entire band had kicked in, following her lead. She wasn't singing the song, she was possessing it. I would rather go blind, boy, than to see you walk away from me, child. Marcus Lutter's smirk froze, then melted. His face went pale. This was not supposed to happen. She wasn't just performing, she was testifying. Every note was perfect, a growl of pain that vibrated in the crystal of every chandelier. She was laying bare the raw soul of the music, and in doing so she was laying bare his empty cruelty. She didn't look at him until the final building crescendo. And I just don't want to be free, no. Ooh, baby, I'd rather go blind. She held the last note, her voice soaring above the band in a breathtaking display of control before letting it fade into the stunned silence. For a solid 5 seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Hideki Tanaka, the investor, slowly stood up and began to applaud. Then the room erupted. It wasn't polite applause, it was a thunderous, standing ovation. People were whistling, slack-jawed in awe. Sophie was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked directly at Marcus. She had beaten him. On his stage, in front of his people. The humiliation was absolute, and it was all his. She placed the microphone back in its stand, the sound echoing. She did not bow. She turned, walked down the steps, and strode directly toward the service exit, leaving Marcus Lutter alone on stage, pale and exposed in the spotlight, with the sound of her triumph ringing in his ears.
Marcus caught her in the service corridor, his rage an ugly mask. "You," he barked. Sophie turned. "What, Mr. Lutter, going to accuse me of stealing the show too?" "Who do you think you are?" he hissed, grabbing her arm. She ripped her arm from his grasp. "Don't touch me, ever again. You're fired." He spat the words. "You can't fire me," she laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I don't work for you. I work for the catering agency. And I quit." "Get out of my building," he ordered. "Gladly." She turned and kept walking. "Miss Smith," a different security guard, one she knew, Frank, a friend of her grandfather's, ran up to her, his face pale with panic. "Miss Smith, it's Gilbert. He collapsed." Sophie's world stopped. The anger, the triumph, the arrogant billionaire behind her, it all vanished. "What? Where?" "In the back room. The paramedics are here. He was asking for you." Sophie shoved past Frank, running. She burst through the staff lounge and saw him. Gilbert was on a gurney, an oxygen mask on his face, his eyes closed. "Grandpa!" she screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. His eyes fluttered open, just a slit. "Sophie, my girl." "I'm here, Grandpa. I'm right here." Marcus stood in the doorway, watching the scene. The anger on his face was replaced by a slow, cold horror. What had he done? "Mr. Lutter?" a paramedic asked. "We need to move him. Lenox Hill." "I'm coming with him," Sophie said, gripping Gilbert's hand. "Ma'am, only family in the—" "I am his family," she yelled, her eyes wild. "I'm all he has." As they wheeled him out, Sophie looked back at Marcus Lutter. The hatred in her gaze was so pure, so potent, it made him physically recoil. She was gone. Marcus Lutter stood alone in the service hall, the distant sound of his party still playing, as the scent of antiseptic and the sick silence of Gilbert's collapse swallowed him whole. The victory of his duel felt gray now, covered in the dust of real disaster. He pulled out his phone. He didn't call his lawyer. He didn't call Tanaka. He called his driver. "Lenox Hill, now." The fluorescent lights of the Lenox Hill Hospital waiting room were an insult. They hummed, casting a sick, greenish-yellow pallor over everything. It was 3:17 a.m. Marcus Luter sat in a hard plastic chair, his $10,000 tuxedo rumpled, his bow tie undone and hanging limp. He had never felt so powerless. Power, to Marcus, was control. It was knowing the variables. It was acquisitions, leveraged buyouts, and forcing men like Hideki Tanaka to bend to his will. This sterile, quiet room that smelled of bleach and fear was the opposite of power. He was replaying the moment on stage, the smugness on his face, the cruel, calculated words, "Do you only perform when the rent is due?" He'd done it to assert control, and in doing so, he had likely killed the only man he'd ever truly considered a father. A doctor, looking exhausted and too young, pushed through the double doors. Sophie, who had been huddled in the corner, a small trembling ball of black fabric, shot to her feet. "Mr. Smith's family?" "I'm his granddaughter," Sophie whispered, her voice raw. Marcus stood up, but he stayed back. This was not his place. "Your grandfather, his cancer was very advanced, as you know," the doctor began, and Sophie let out a small broken sound. "The excitement, the stress of the evening, it caused a significant cardiac event. We did everything we could, but his heart failed." Sophie's legs buckled. She didn't scream or cry. She simply folded in on herself, catching her weight on the wall, her hand over her mouth as a silent, agonizing sob shook her entire frame. He woke up for a moment," the doctor said gently. "He's asking for Mr. Luter?" Sophie's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief and a fresh wave of hatred. "What? He's asking for me?" Marcus stepped forward, his own voice hoarse. "Are you Mr. Luter? You have about 2 minutes." Marcus looked at Sophie. Her face was a mask of tear-streaked fury. "You don't deserve to see him," she whispered. "Sophie," Marcus pleaded, his arrogance completely stripped away, leaving only a desperate, guilty 26-year-old. "Please." She stared at him for a long, terrible second, then nodded, a sharp, jerky movement. "Go. Just go." Marcus walked past the doctor, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Gilbert's room was dark, save for the rhythmic, ominous glow of monitors. The old man looked ancient, a frail collection of bones under a thin white sheet. "Marcus," Gilbert's voice was a dry rattle. "I'm here, Gilbert." Marcus gripped the bed rail, his knuckles white. You were always so angry," Gilbert wheezed, a faint smile touching his lips. "Even as a boy, like a thunderstorm in a teacup." "I'm so sorry, Gilbert. About tonight, about Sophie. Shh!" Gilbert's eyelids fluttered. "Not time." He focused on Marcus, his gaze suddenly sharp, lucid. "She's alone, Marcus, like you were. Her parents, gone." "I know," Marcus whispered, a cold dread creeping into his chest. "Promise me." It wasn't a request, it was a command from the only man who could command him. "Protect her. Take care of my Sophie. Until she's married. Safe. Promise me."
Marcus looked at this dying man, the man who had taught him how to tie a tie, who had sat with him through the night after his parents' funeral. He saw the stage. He saw Sophie's face. He saw the humiliation he'd caused. This was his penance. "I promise, Gilbert," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "I swear to you, I'll take care of her." A single, long sigh rattled from Gilbert's chest. The tension left his face. "Good boy." And then the line on the heart monitor, which had been struggling, flattened into a single, high-pitched, unending tone. Marcus Luter stood there as nurses rushed in, as the sounds of futile emergency medicine filled the room. He didn't move. He just stared at the flat line, the weight of an unbreakable promise settling on him like a shroud. 2 weeks later, Marcus was in hell, a different kind of hell. This one was all glass, overlooking Central Park from his penthouse office. Hideki Tanaka had voted no. The Atlas Dynamics deal was in flames. The reason? Count Antonio Vescovi, the 80-year-old opera-obsessed Italian aristocrat who held the deciding 10% stake in Atlas. Vescovi had heard about the incident at the gala, not the fight, but the fact that Marcus had allowed subpar lounge music to be played before being upstaged by a waitress. Vescovi, a notorious purist, had declared in a memo to the board that a man with such barbaric taste could not be trusted with the artistry of Atlas's aerospace engineering. The deal was dead. Unless... "He's given you one last chance," Jessica Becker said, tapping a file. "He's flying into New York on Friday. He has agreed to a private dinner at your home. He wants an evening of authentic musical artistry. If you can impress him, the deal is back on." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Call the Met. Get me their lead soprano. I don't care what it costs." "He already thought of that," Jessica said, her voice tight. "He specified, no hired guns, no professionals who sing for a paycheck. He wants raw, undiscovered talent. He wants a muse." Marcus looked up, the words raw talent echoing in his head. He thought of the gala. He thought of that voice, the one that had silenced the room and cost him everything. Sophie Smith. He hadn't spoken to her since the funeral, an event he had paid for but attended from the back row, like a coward. He had sent her checks, settlements from Gilbert's estate, but his bank informed him they were all returned, uncashed. "Find her," he said to Jessica. "Who?" "Sophie Smith. Find out where she is now." Jessica Becker's smile was thin. "I already did." She slid a piece of paper across his desk. "Gilbert's apartment, Upper West Side. The bank seized it to cover medical debts. She's being formally evicted as we speak." The pre-war apartment building was nice, but the hallway smelled of old carpets and lemon polish. Marcus found her on the 4th floor, outside apartment 4B. Sophie was sitting on a packed cardboard box, arguing with a building manager who held a clipboard. "But the check for this month's rent cleared," she was saying, her voice strained. "The rent, yes, but the accrued medical debt. The estate is insolvent, Miss Smith. The bank is the primary lien holder. You have to be out by 5. Mr. Lutter." Sophie shot her head up. She saw him, and all the color drained from her face, replaced with a cold, dull anger. "You?" she breathed. "You need to talk to me," Marcus said, ignoring the manager. "We have nothing to talk about. Get out." "Please, Sophie." "Don't," she hissed, standing up. "Don't you dare use my name. You come here to my grandfather's home after you... She choked on the words. "After you killed him." "That's not fair," Marcus said, his own guilt flaring into defense. "He was sick. He was fine," she cried, and now the tears she'd been holding back streamed down her face. "He was tired, but he was fine. You and your sick, pathetic need to humiliate everyone. You stressed his heart until it gave out. So get out. Go." "I can't." He took a deep breath. "I need your help." Sophie stared at him, then let out a laugh. It was a broken, ugly sound. "My help? You must be joking." "The hospital bills. Gilbert's. They're astronomical. I checked this morning. They total over $800,000. Sophie flinched. She knew. "That debt is now yours," he said quietly. "You'll be paying it off for the rest of your life. You'll never own a home. You'll never be free." "What do you want, Marcus?" she whispered. "I have a business deal. A $10 billion deal that hinges on one dinner this Friday. I need a singer. A real singer." Sophie understood immediately. "You want to pimp out the voice you tried to silence. I want to offer you a job," he countered, all business. You will move into my guest suite. You will rehearse. You will perform for 2 hours on Friday night. In exchange, I will wipe out the entire $800,000 debt, and I will fulfill my promise to your grandfather. Her eyes narrowed. What promise? He made me promise to take care of you.
That was the final straw. Sophie hauled back and slapped him across the face. The sound was sharp, cracking in the small hallway. The building manager winced. "You take care of me?" she seethed, her hand stinging. "You were the last man on earth Gilbert would have wanted near me. He was a good man. He didn't see the monster you are." "The monster is offering you a way out, Sophie," Marcus shot back, the red mark on his cheek blazing. "Take the deal. Be free of the debt. Or keep your pride and spend the next 30 years working 3 jobs to pay off the interest. Your choice." He saw the war in her eyes, the pride, the exhaustion, the crushing weight of that impossible number. "I won't live with you," she said, her voice shaking. "It's non-negotiable. The investor is eccentric. He wants authenticity. That means you have to be in residence. It's 4 days." She looked at the eviction notice on the door. She looked at the boxes. She looked at the man she hated more than anything in the world. "Fine," she spat. "I'll sing for your stupid dinner. I'll do it to pay the debt my grandfather died for. But this isn't for you. This is for him. And the second it's over, you and I are done. I never want to see your face again." "Done," Marcus nodded, his face impassive. "My car is downstairs." The next 4 days were the definition of war. The guest suite in Marcus's penthouse was larger than her entire apartment, with a staggering view of the park, but it felt like a cage. They rehearsed in the grand salon, which had a black baby grand piano. Marcus, it turned out, was a technically brilliant pianist, but he played with no heart. "You're rushing," he'd clip. "The aria is in 3/4 time." "I know what time it's in," she'd fire back. "You're playing it like a metronome. It's Puccini, not a stock ticker. It's supposed to breathe. It's supposed to be perfect." They fought over everything: the tempo, the song choice, the air conditioning. On the 3rd night, it was late, past midnight. They were both exhausted. Sophie was running through O mio babino caro, and she was struggling with the emotional pitch. "I can't," she said, rubbing her temples. I just can't find it." "Find what?" Marcus said, exasperated. "The notes are on the page." "The feeling," she snapped. "It's a song about a daughter begging her father. It's about love and desperation. I try to sing it, and all I can feel is this." She waved her hand around the cold, sterile room. And you." "Then don't think about me," he said, turning back to the keys. "I can't. I look at you and I see the man who humiliated me, who humiliated my grandfather, and who's now holding me prisoner over a mountain of debt." Marcus slammed his hands on the keys, creating a deafening, discordant crash. "Stop!" he roared, standing up so fast the piano bench toppled over. Sophie recoiled. "Just stop," he said again, his voice cracking. He walked to the wall of windows, his back to her, his hands braced against the glass. "You think I'm a monster. I am. You think I'm arrogant, that I'm cruel. You're right." He took a ragged breath. "But you have no idea." He turned around. The arrogant mask was gone. In its place was the broken, guilty man from the hospital. Her name was Amelia, my ex-fiancée. She was perfect, looked perfect, sounded perfect. She was from a good family, or so I thought. She was a social climber, a brilliant one. I was going to marry her,
A week before the wedding, I picked up her phone by accident. I saw the texts to her lover. They had a 2-year plan. Landing the whale. That was me. The whale. He looked up, and his eyes were hollow. It wasn't just the lie. It was how easy it was for her. How she'd cry and tell me she loved me, and 10 minutes later she'd be texting him about which of my properties they'd sell first. "Marcus," whispered Sophie. "My arrogance, it's not arrogance, Sophie. It's armor. It's the only thing that stops it from happening again. When I looked at you, this young, beautiful artist hanging on Gilbert, all I could see was her. All I could see was the next con. I was wrong. I was a goddamn fool. And your grandfather paid the price for it." It was the first real apology, the first moment of genuine, unfiltered vulnerability. Sophie didn't move. She saw it all. The pain, the paranoia, the profound loneliness of a man who trusted no one, not even himself. The anger that had protected her for 2 weeks began to crack. She saw the boy who'd lost his parents, the man who'd had his heart ripped out. She slowly walked over. She didn't move. She just sat down on the far end of the piano bench. "She must have been an idiot," she said quietly. He looked up, confused. "What?" "Amelia, to have you, someone who plays like you do, someone who loved her, and to throw it away for money." He stared at her. You're defending me?" "No," she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. I'm a good judge of character. Eventually." A silence settled between them. It was no longer a cold, warring silence. It was something new, tentative. "Let's try the aria again, from the top." He turned to the keys. This time, when he played, the notes had heart, and when she sang, she found the feeling.
Friday night. The dinner. Count Vescovy was a terrifying ancient man in a velvet smoking jacket. He ate his risotto in silence, his eyes fixed on Sophie, who sat at the end of the table. After dessert, Marcus nodded. It was time. Sophie stood by the piano. She didn't sing the aria they'd rehearsed. Instead, she looked at the Count and sang a quiet, obscure Neapolitan folk song that Gilbert used to hum. A song of home, of loss, and of the sea. Her voice, pure and unadorned, filled the room. When she finished, the Count was silent. He slowly dabbed his mouth with a napkin. He looked at Marcus. "You, sir, are a fool. You have barbaric taste. You are arrogant, and you are impatient." Marcus's heart sank. "But this young woman," the Count said, his eyes turning to Sophie, "she is pura. She is pure. She has the soul of my homeland. A man who can find talent like this, perhaps he is not a barbarian after all. He is just an American." He stood up. "The deal is approved, Mr. Lutter. My compliment to the artist." He bowed to Sophie and left. It was over. They had won. Sophie and Marcus stood in the salon, the adrenaline of the night thrumming between them. You did it," Marcus breathed, a slow smile spreading across his face. A real smile. It transformed him. "We did it," she corrected, unable to stop her own laugh. "He called you a barbarian." "He approved the deal." Marcus moved closer. "Your debt is gone, as of this second." "So I'm free to go," she said, but she made no move to leave. "You are." He was standing in front of her now. The space between them was electric. "Gilbert's promise. It's fulfilled, I guess." "No," he said, his voice low. "I don't think it is." He reached up, not to grab,
but to gently tuck a stray piece of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her skin. She shivered. "You were magnificent, Sophie." "You weren't so bad yourself, Lutter, for a barbarian." His smile faded, replaced with something raw and honest, the same vulnerability from the other night. "My trauma, it's not an excuse, but it's the truth. And seeing you tonight, He didn't finish the sentence. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a thank you kiss. It was a kiss of pent-up frustration, of shared victory, of 4 days of fighting and tension exploding at once. Sophie's hands, which had meant to push him away, instead gripped the lapels of his jacket. She kissed him back, pouring all her grief, her anger, and her new, terrifying hope into it. It was a long, deep, breathtaking kiss that sealed the $10 billion deal and broke the truce all at once. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "Sophie," he whispered. This was it, the false happy ending, the moment the audience would relax, believing the story was over. But the real story was just beginning. The kiss hadn't just sealed a deal, it had shattered a stalemate. The week that followed was a blur of tentative, intoxicating peace. Sophie didn't move out. The guest suite key was left on the marble console table, untouched. She was staying in the master bedroom now. The penthouse, once a cold, all-glass cage, began to feel like a sanctuary. She'd sing in the mornings, not for rehearsal, but for joy, and the sound would drift down the hall to Marcus's office. He was a different man. The armor he spoke of was still there, but she could see the seams. He smiled. He left meetings early. He'd sit at the piano, and she'd lean against it, and they'd talk about music, about her parents, about anything but Gilbert's death or Amelia's betrayal. They were, in their own broken way, healing. But a wound, if not properly cleaned, will always fester. Marcus Lutter, the CEO, was a man who ran on data. His trauma wasn't just an emotional scar, it was a deeply ingrained operational protocol. Trust, but verify, and in his case, verify, then verify again.
He was falling for Sophie. He was almost certain she was genuine, but almost wasn't 100%. Amelia had fooled him for 2 years. Sophie had been in his life for 3 weeks. On Tuesday morning, while Sophie was in the shower, he made the call. It was the hero's mistake. "David," he said into his phone, speaking to the head of his private security, a man whose entire job was paranoid discretion. "That background check you ran on Miss Smith 2 weeks ago, it was superficial." "Sir, it was what you asked for. Asset check, primary debts," David replied. "I need the deep dive," Marcus said, his voice low, hating himself for it. "Everything. Emails, text logs, associates. I need to know who she's talking to, what she's planning. I need to know, David. I need to be sure." "Understood, Mr. Lutter. It's invasive. It'll be done by tomorrow. Do it." He hung up just as the bathroom door opened, a cloud of steam preceding Sophie, who was wrapped in a white towel, her hair damp, her face bright. "Who is that?" she asked, smiling. "Just business," Marcus lied, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Across town, in a sterile, glass-walled office at Lutter Enterprises, Jessica Becker was watching her world burn. Jessica was not just a VP. She had been Marcus's shadow for 8 years. She'd been his fixer when his father died. She'd been the one who'd personally managed the Amelia problem, paying off the lover and scrubbing the security footage of the ex-fiancé storming out. She had earned her place at his right hand. She had waited. She assumed, with the certainty of a zealot, that once Marcus was done playing with his toys, he would turn and see her, the one who was always there, the corporate queen. For the past week, she had watched the waitress transform. Sophie now came into the office.
She wore a simple, elegant dress Marcus had bought her. She'd bring him coffee. Marcus, who never looked up for anyone, would smile at her. He'd touch the small of her back. This morning, she had seen it. Marcus, leaving for a lunch meeting, had kissed Sophie in the elevator bay. Not a peck, a real, possessive, lingering kiss. It was not a fling. It was a replacement. Jessica's calculated patience snapped. This wasn't Amelia 2.0. This was worse. This thing, this singer, was undoing years of her work. She had to cut it out. She knew Marcus's protocol. She knew about David, his security head. She walked into Marcus's empty office. His private server password was, ironically, the name of the dog he had as a boy, Winston. So predictable. She logged into his private security server, and there it was. File, Smith, S, Deep Dive, in progress. She opened it. It was everything: phone records, bank statements, and most damningly, a series of emails from 2 days ago. To smithmusic@gmail.com. From Leo Vance, producer at vancemusicla.com. Subject: your demo. Sophie, got the demo you sent last month. Look, it's raw, but it's real. I think I can do something with this. If you're ever in LA, I've got studio time. We could cut a track and see what happens. This could be big. Jessica smiled. It was a cold, sharp, bloodless thing. The email was innocent. A what-if from a small-time producer, sent before Sophie's life had collided with Marcus's. But Jessica knew how to spin it. She forwarded the entire PI report to a private encrypted email. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. Max, she said, her voice smooth as silk. It's Jessica Becker. I've got a story for your page 6 column, and this one's a bombshell. Wednesday, 7 a.m. Sophie woke up alone. The space beside her in the king-size bed was cool. Marcus had left early for a breakfast meeting. She stretched, a lazy, contented stretch, feeling safer than she had in her entire life. She reached for her phone on the nightstand to check the time, and her world detonated.
The screen was a blinding wall of notifications. 22 missed calls, over 50 text messages, and the push alerts. Page 6, the butler's granddaughter sings a gold digger's tune. Daily Mail, exclusive, grieving granddaughter of Lutter Butler in talks with L.A. producer, plans to dump whale CEO. The Post, the long con, how Sophie Smith played the Lutter heir. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely tap the link. She read the page 6 article. It was vicious. It was detailed. Quote, sources say Sophie Smith, 24, who charmed her way into billionaire Marcus Lutter's penthouse after the tragic death of her grandfather, isn't planning on sticking around. While playing the part of the grieving ingenue, Miss Smith has been actively shopping a demo to L.A. producers. It quoted the email from Leo Vance. It detailed her mountain of debt, the $800,000, and framed it as her price. It painted her as a colder, more calculating version of Amelia. No, she whispered. How could they know this? How could they know about the debt, about Leo? She threw the covers off, her heart pounding with a sick, cold dread. He wouldn't. He couldn't. She ran from the bedroom, barefoot, wearing only one of Marcus's shirts. Marcus, she called out, knowing he was gone. She went to his office, the place she'd brought him coffee just yesterday. She didn't know what she was looking for, a clue, an explanation, and she saw it. On the corner of his immaculate $10,000 oak desk, where his inbox should be, it was a thick, spiral-bound report, a hard copy. David must have dropped it off after she fell asleep. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. The cover page was stark. Confidential report. Subject, Smith Sophie. Deep dive. active surveillance, date, current date. She opened it. It wasn't just the email. It was everything. Her phone records, transcripts of texts to her one friend from college, her student loan statements, a photo of her scruffy ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago, an analysis of her laptop's hard drive. He hadn't just investigated her. He had dissected her. And the date. The report was ordered Tuesday, after the kiss, after the dinner, after they had slept together, after she had trusted him with the broken pieces of her own heart. He'd held her in his arms, and then he'd paid a man to spy on her. The paranoia he'd spoken of, the armor he claimed, it wasn't just a defense, it was a weapon. And he had aimed it right at her. The trust shattered. It didn't just break, it evaporated, as if it had never existed at all. This was his trauma, but it was her betrayal. She heard the ding of the private elevator. Marcus was back. He walked into the office, shrugging off his suit jacket, a smile on his face. "You're up early. That breakfast meeting was a waste of—" He stopped. He saw her. He saw her face, pale and streaked with fresh tears, and he saw the report in her hands. The blood drained from his face. "Sophie." She held up the report. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice dangerously quiet. "Sophie, let me explain. What is this?" she demanded, louder now. It's a precaution. It's what I do, Sophie. It's the Amelia protocol. It doesn't mean anything." "It doesn't mean anything?" she repeated, her voice cracking with a hysterical laugh. "It's my life, Marcus. My texts, my emails. You did this after?" "I had to be sure," he yelled, defensive, panicked. "Sure of what?" At him. The pages scattered across the floor. "Sure that I wasn't another Amelia? Did you find what you were looking for? Does this," she pointed to the page 6 article on her phone, "does this make you feel sure?" He saw the headline. I didn't do that. That's not me. That must be Jessica. Oh, God. "It doesn't matter who leaked it," she cried, backing away from him as he stepped toward her. "You're the one who bought the poison. You're the one who held the gun. You told me you were broken. I believed you. I was starting to—" She choked on the words. "I'm not your ex-fiancé. I told you that, but you'll never see anything else." She was quoting her own words from the hospital, the words she had said when she still hated him. "Sophie, please," he begged, reaching for her. "Don't. I took this shirt because I felt safe. What a fool. What an absolute stupid fool. Don't go. We can fix this." "Fix what, Marcus?" she said, her voice dropping to a cold, dead whisper. "You can't fix this. You can't unread my emails. You can't unhire the spy. You can't go back and not be the man who needed a PI report to sleep with me. That's not what it was. It's exactly what it was." She walked past him, out of the office. He followed her, pleading, "Where are you going?" "To get my things." "Sophie, wait. We won. The deal is done. The debt is paid. This is just a mistake." She stopped at the bedroom door and looked back at him. The fiery, passionate woman from the gala was gone. The soft, healing woman from the night before was gone. In her place was a stranger, her eyes as cold and empty as the penthouse. "You didn't just investigate me, Marcus," she said. "You broke your promise." "What? No! I paid the debt. You're safe." "He asked you to take care of me," she said, her voice shaking with the force of her betrayal. "He asked you to protect me, and instead you fed me to the wolves to make yourself feel safe." She turned and closed the bedroom door in his face. He stood there, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing. This was it, the first separation. He had won his deal. He had confirmed his suspicions, and he had lost the one person who had ever made him feel like a man instead of a whale. The penthouse was silent. It had been 3 weeks since Sophie walked out. The silence she left behind was a physical presence, a cold, heavy fog that Marcus couldn't escape. The piano was just a piece of expensive lacquered furniture. The view of the park was just glass. He had fired Jessica Becker. He'd done it the day after Sophie left, in a cold, controlled rage. Jessica hadn't even tried to deny it. "It was for you, Marcus," she'd said, her voice a zealous hiss. "She was another Amelia. I was protecting the company. I was protecting you." "You leaked a confidential PI report to the press. That's corporate sabotage. Get out. You're done." Her exit had been quiet, but her eyes had been filled with a chilling, proprietary venom. Now he was paying the price. His phone buzzed. A name flashed on the screen that made his blood run cold. Julian Mercer. Julian Mercer was a ghost from his father's past, his father's original partner, the man they'd allegedly forced out in a brutal boardroom coup 20 years ago. Mercer had spent the last 2 decades building a rival empire, Mercer Global, fueled by pure, unadulterated hatred for the Lutter name. Marcus answered. "Julian?" "Marcus, my boy, I see you're having some management turnover. Jessica Becker was a fine VP. Pity letting go of someone so loyal." Marcus froze. "What? Do you know about Jessica?" "Oh, quite a lot. She's been on my payroll for 2 years, feeding me your acquisition data." The line went silent. 2 years. Before Amelia. Before Gilbert's death. What? "She was my failsafe, Marcus. I knew your father's son would be arrogant, but I'll admit, Jessica's initiative with the little singer was a masterstroke. She didn't just destabilize your deal with Vescovi. She destabilized you. Brilliant." It was like a bucket of ice water. The betrayal from Sophie, the page 6 article, it wasn't just Jessica's jealousy. It was a calculated attack. It was espionage. "And now it's time to cash in. I'm initiating a hostile takeover of Lutter Enterprises. The official SEC filing will hit in 5 minutes. Thanks to Jessica's data, I know exactly where all your leveraged assets are. You're overextended, boy. You're vulnerable." He continued, "The final shareholder vote will be at the annual charity gala in 1 week. You might want to prepare a speech, a concession speech. Goodbye, Marcus. Say hello to your father for me when you see him in hell." The line clicked. He stood there, the phone in his hand. He wasn't just heartbroken. He was at war, and he'd been fighting the wrong enemy all along. Jessica hadn't just leaked the report to hurt Sophie. She'd done it to sabotage the Atlas deal, to weaken his position, to soften him up for Mercer's killing blow. He and Sophie hadn't just been betrayed by his paranoia. They had been used. They were pawns in Mercer's long game. He had to find her. It took David, his security head, now working overtime on loyalty checks, 48 hours to find her. She wasn't in New York. She hadn't gone to Leo Vance in L.A. She was in a small, smoky jazz club in the village called the Blue Note. Not the famous one, a cheaper, grimier one. She wasn't a headliner. She was backup vocals. He walked in on a Tuesday night. The place smelled of stale beer and regret. She was on a small, badly lit stage, her back to the audience. singing harmony for a painfully mediocre saxophonist. This was the woman who had brought a room of billionaires to their feet. This was the voice that had saved his company. When the set ended, she grabbed a denim jacket from the floor and headed for the back door. "Sophie," he called out. She froze. She turned, and the look on her face was not anger. It was a deep, profound, soul-crushing exhaustion. "Leave me alone, Marcus," she said, her voice hoarse. "I need you to listen to me. 5 minutes, please." He was not a CEO. He was a man begging. She sighed, running a hand through her hair, and leaned against the brick wall of the alley. 5 minutes. Then you leave. Forever. He laid it all out. Julian Mercer, Jessica Becker, the 2-year corporate espionage, the hostile takeover, the gala. "It wasn't just my paranoia," he said, his words coming out in a rush. "It was a setup. Jessica wanted me to find the report. She wanted to leak it. She used my trauma, and she used you to destabilize the company for Mercer. We were attacked, Sophie. Both of us." Sophie listened, her expression unreadable. "I don't care," she said finally. "It doesn't change what you did. You still ordered the report. You still didn't trust me." "I know," he said, desperate, "and I will spend the rest of my life making that up to you. But right now, I need your help. I need your help." "My help? What, you want me to sing for your shareholders now? Distract them while Mercer robs you blind?" "Yes," he said, dead serious. She stared at him. "You're insane." "Count Vescosi," Marcus said, playing his last card. "The Italian investor. He's the swing vote. He holds 10% from the Atlas deal. He's flying in for the gala. He idolizes you. He doesn't trust me, but he trusts your soul. Mercer has been in his ear, telling him I'm a fraud, that I used you." "You did use me," she shot back. "This isn't about me anymore, Sophie. This is about my father's legacy. This is about Gilbert's legacy. Lutter Enterprises funds his pension, his foundation. If Mercer takes over, he will dissolve it all out of spite. He will erase them. He will erase us." He saw a flicker in her eyes, the mention of Gilbert. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, one last time. Don't do it for me. Do it for Gilbert. Help me save his memory." She hated him. She hated that he knew her weakness. She hated that, even after everything, the thought of Julian Mercer destroying Gilbert's name made her sick. "One night," she said, her voice ice. "I'll sing. I'll talk to Vescovi. I will help you save your company. And then, Marcus, you and I are finished. You will delete my number. You will forget my name. We will be strangers." "Done," he said, his heart aching. "Whatever you want." The Letter Charity Gala was not a party. It was a battlefield. The ballroom was thick with tension. Julian Mercer was already there, holding court by the bar, radiating a smug, victorious energy. Marcus was pale, greeting shareholders, his smile a tight, painful grimace. Sophie arrived alone. She wore a simple, devastatingly elegant black dress. She was not a waitress. She was not a guest. She was a ringer. She found Count Vescovi by the silent auction. "Count," she said. His old face lit up. "Miss Smith, l'artista! My dear, they say he treated you poorly." "Mr. Mercer says a lot of things," Sophie said, her voice smooth. "Marcus Lutter is a complicated man. He is arrogant, he is paranoid, and he is broken in ways I don't think he'll ever be able to fix. But he is not a fraud. He loves his company, and he loved my grandfather." Vescovi searched her face. "You believe this? I'm here, aren't I?" It was time. The main entertainment, a famous singer, was just finishing. Marcus stepped to the podium for the special announcement, which everyone knew was the vote. "Before we proceed," Marcus said, his voice tight, "it has come to my attention that there is a story circulating. A story that my VP, Jessica Becker, was fired for personal, not professional reasons." A murmur went through the crowd. Mercer smiled into his champagne glass. "That," Marcus said, "is a lie." He gestured to the main screen. "This is a wire transfer from a shell corporation owned by Mercer Global to a private account owned by Ms. Becker, dated 2 years ago." The room gasped. Mercer's smile vanished. "For 2 years," Marcus announced, his voice ringing with power, "Ms. Becker has been committing corporate espionage. She leaked the very report that cost me my deal and my reputation at the behest of Julian Mercer." He played a recording, Jessica's voice from her exit interview, boasting, "I did what was necessary to protect the company." Then a new recording from a phone call Marcus had taped. "Mercer promised me 20%. He said he'd make me CEO." The room was in chaos. The shareholders were on their feet, yelling. "He's trying to steal this company," Marcus yelled over the din. "He used her, he used me, and he used a woman of incredible talent. A woman he tried to frame as a gold digger when in reality she was the one who saved the Atlas deal. Ms. Sophie Smith." He turned to her. He held out his hand. Sophie walked to the stage. She took the mic. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Vescovi. She sang. She sang Nessun Dorna, a man's aria, an aria of defiance, of pain, and of absolute certain victory. "Vincerò, I will win." Her voice was not a performance. It was a declaration of war. It filled the room, it silenced the arguments, it pinned Julian Mercer to his spot. It was, quite possibly, the most powerful thing anyone in that room had ever heard. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Count Vescovi stood up. "I vote with Lutter," he declared. The spell was broken. A wave of applause and eyes filled the room. The vote was a landslide. Mercer's proxies were useless. Marcus had won. He turned to Sophie on the stage, his eyes shining with tears. He was breathless. "You did it! Sophie, you did it! You saved us!" The euphoria was palpable. They were a team. They had faced the dragon and won. He pulled her close, and in the chaos of the cheering, he didn't care who was watching. He kissed her, and she kissed him back. The false victory. "Bravo, Marcus! Bravo!" The voice cut through the celebration. Julian Mercer was standing by the stage, slowly, mockingly applauding. Security was moving toward him. "A wonderful performance," Mercer shouted, his face a mask of rage. "You found the rat, and you used the little songbird to charm the old Italian. Brilliant!" "Get him out of here," Marcus snapped. "But you're a fool, Marcus, just like your father," Mercer yelled as the guards grabbed his arms. "You didn't even see the real setup." "What are you talking about, Julian? It's over." Mercer laughed, a high, chilling sound. "You really don't know, do you? You think this was my plan? This was Gilbert's plan." Marcus froze. "What?" Sophie's hands went cold. "Oh, yes!" Mercer was savoring this, his final devastating bomb. "Gilbert knew about Amelia. He knew you were a paranoid wreck. He knew you'd never trust a woman again. So what does he do?" Mercer gestured wildly at Sophie. "He finds the one girl in the world you're forced to protect, his poor orphaned granddaughter. He knew you'd fall for her. He knew you'd push her away. He made you promise to take care of her. It was the perfect guilt trip. He set you up. He played you from the grave." This was the lie. The perfect, credible, devastating lie. It targeted Marcus's deepest, most septic wound, his trauma of being played. That's not true," Sophie whispered, looking at Marcus. But Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Mercer, his face ashen. He was replaying everything, Gilbert's insistence, the timing. Take care of her until she's married. It was a setup, a con, landing the whale. "Sophie," he whispered, his voice hollow. He turned to her, his eyes filled with the old, familiar, sick paranoia. "Sophie, is that true? Did you and Gilbert plan this?" This was it, the second betrayal, the breach of heart. After everything, after she'd saved him, after she'd bared her soul for him, he still believed the lie. Sophie froze. The color drained from her face. The love, the hope, the euphoria, it all shattered, turning to ice. He hadn't just doubted her. He had believed without hesitation that her grandfather, the best man she'd ever known, was a monster. That she was a monster. This was the true betrayal, the one from which there was no recovery. "Look at her face, Marcus," Mercer cackled as security dragged him away. "She can't even deny it." Marcus stared at Sophie, his eyes pleading, desperate for her to say something. "Sophie, tell me it's not true." She looked at him, the man she had just saved, the man she had, for one stupid, insane moment, thought she loved. Her heart didn't just break, it turned to dust. She raised the microphone to her lips, her voice coming out as a dead, cold whisper that echoed through the now silent ballroom. She delivered the 4 words, "I never loved you." She dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a thud and a scream of feedback. She turned and walked off the stage, out of the ballroom and out of his life. The second separation. The absolute lowest point. Marcus Lutter stood alone, victorious in business, and utterly, irrevocably destroyed in his soul. 6 months passed. The name Marcus Lutter vanished from the society pages. After that night, he became a ghost. He won the war, saved his company, and then, in the eyes of New York, he simply ceased to exist. He was a recluse in his glass tower, haunted by the feedback of a dropped microphone and the 4 words that had ended him. For the first month, he was a wreck. He drank. He stared at the piano. He replayed Mercer's words over and over. He played you from the grave. But Mercer's lie, so potent in the heat of the moment, began to fray in the cold, sober light of dawn. It was too neat, too perfect. It preyed on his exact trauma. And it wasn't who Gilbert Smith was. In the second month, Marcus went to work. He didn't focus on the company. He focused on the truth. He hired a new PI firm, not to spy, but to investigate. He tasked them with finding 2 things: every letter, email, or correspondence Gilbert Smith had written in the last 5 years, and the real story of Julian Mercer. The truth, when it came, was worse than he could have imagined. David, his security head, brought him a stack of letters recovered from a storage unit in Queens that Sophie didn't know existed. They were letters Gilbert had written to his late wife, a kind of diary. One, dated 6 months ago, just after Sophie had moved in with him, read, "My dearest Mary, she's here, our Sophie. She's so much like her mother, all fire and music. But she's struggling, and my sickness is a burden she shouldn't have to bear. And then there's Marcus. He's a good boy, Mary. But that woman, Amelia, she put a shard of ice in his heart. He looks at Sophie and he sees a ghost. He's so afraid of being played that he's going to destroy the only real thing that's ever walked into his life. I'm afraid for them both." He dropped the letter. It wasn't a setup. It was a tragedy. Another letter, written just days before the gala, was even chilling. "I'm going to ask him to promise, to take care of her. It's a risk, I know. A man like Marcus, burdened by a promise, it could either save him or be the very thing that makes him push her away. God, I hope he sees. I hope he finally sees what's right in front of him." It was never a con. It was a desperate, dying man's gamble to save two orphans at once. A gamble Marcus had lost. The second file was about Julian Mercer. The story of him being forced out by Marcus's father was a lie. Mercer had been caught embezzling. He'd been stealing from the company for years. Marcus's father, in a moment of pity for his old friend, hadn't pressed charges. He just forced him out, allowing him to keep what he'd already stolen. Mercer's entire revenge was built on a projection of his own crimes. Marcus Lutter finally understood. He hadn't been betrayed by Sophie. He hadn't been betrayed by Gilbert. He had been betrayed by his own broken, paranoid mind. His 4 words, "Did you plan this?" were the real sin. Her 4 words, "I never loved you," were just the consequence. He knew, with chilling certainty, that he could never fix this with words. An apology was an insult. A check was a disgrace. He had to atone. Action, not words. He picked up the phone. "Sell it," he said to his broker. "Mr. Lutter, sell what?" "My majority stake in Lutter Enterprises. All of it. Liquidate it. And sell the penthouse. I want it all moved into an anonymous charitable trust." "Sir, that's billions." "I know," Marcus said, and hung up. Meanwhile, Sophie had disappeared too. She'd taken the money from her final performance, a paycheck Marcus had insisted on, which she'd cashed out of pure spite, and she'd rented a tiny, run-down storefront in Brooklyn. She'd scrubbed the floors, painted the walls, and put a sign in the window, hand-painted, "The Gilbert Smith Studio. Free music lessons for kids who need them." She poured her grief into it. She taught piano to kids in torn sneakers. She taught harmony to teenagers who were rough around the edges. She found a broken, out-of-tune baby grand at a thrift store and spent a week fixing it herself.
She was broke. She was exhausted. She was, for the first time in her life, completely whole. Her studio became a neighborhood sensation. A local news blog wrote a story about her. The Angel of Brooklyn, they called her. She was healing, note by note, child by child. One day, a man in a suit showed up. "Miss Smith, I represent the Harmony Foundation. We're an anonymous charitable trust. We read the story about your studio. We'd like to help." "We don't need charity," Sophie said, defensive. "It's not charity, Miss Smith. It's an investment." 3 months later, the Harmony Foundation had bought the entire building. They bought the abandoned warehouse next door. Construction crews worked 24/7. Sophie was baffled. They were building a conservatory, a state-of-the-art, acoustically perfect, 3-story music conservatory, with a recital hall, soundproof practice rooms, and a recording studio. The name on the bronze plaque being installed out front read, "The Gilbert Smith Conservatory for Music." It was the grand opening. The conservatory was packed with kids, parents, local politicians, and news crews. Sophie was in a daze, wearing a simple black dress, her heart pounding. The head of the Harmony Foundation, the same man in the suit, made a speech. "This was all made possible by our founder," he said.
He wishes to remain anonymous, but he has one last gift. Our new recital hall has been gifted a one-of-a-kind, concert-grade Steinway. And it's a bit out of tune. We've brought in a local technician to prepare it for its inaugural performance. The lights in the hall dimmed. A single spotlight hit the stage. A man was sitting at the piano, his back to the audience, in jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and work boots. He was hunched over, plinking at a single key. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She knew that posture. She knew those shoulders. "No," she whispered. He turned his head slightly. It was Marcus. He looked different, thinner. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, weary humility. He wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man. He put his hands on the keys and began to play. It was her song, the song from the gala, "I'd Rather Go Blind." And he was playing it badly. The timing was off, the chords were clumsy. He was a classical player, and this raw, bluesy music was alien to his hands. But he was trying. The crowd murmured, confused. Sophie couldn't breathe. He was apologizing, in the only way he knew how. He was showing her in front of the world that he was clumsy, that he was broken, that he didn't have the soul, but God, he was trying to find it. He stopped, frustrated, and hit a clunker of a chord. The room was silent. Sophie walked from the front row. She walked up the steps to the stage. The spotlight followed her. She walked to the piano. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears, terrified. He looked like the boy who'd lost his parents. "You're rushing," she whispered, her own voice thick with tears, "and your timing is off." She sat down next to him on the bench. She placed her hands over his on the keys. You did this," she whispered, gesturing to the magnificent hall. "The foundation. It's you." I had to," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse. "The money. It was the armor. It wasn't real. This is real." "You ruined Julian Mercer," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd read the news. Mercer Global had been dismantled, bought out by a hostile, anonymous entity and sold for parts. He built an empire on a lie. I used the truth. He anonymously leaked his father's files, the ones proving Mercer's embezzlement, to every regulator and journalist in the country. Mercer was facing federal fraud charges. Jessica Becker was already in prison, an accessory to the same. "You sold everything," she said, finally understanding. "The company, the penthouse." "It was never mine," he said. "It was just something I was hiding behind." He looked at her, his gaze raw, open, and completely vulnerable. "There was no armor left. Gilbert asked me to take care of you," he said, his voice breaking. "And I failed. I failed him. I failed you. I didn't know what it meant. I thought it meant money, control, protection. But I was just protecting myself."
He slid off the piano bench and onto one knee on the stage. He wasn't holding a diamond. He was holding a simple, small iron key. "This," he said, "is the key to a small house in the English countryside. The house your grandfather was born in, the one your mother lost. It's yours. I bought it. I've been fixing it for 6 months, rebuilding the garden." Sophie was openly sobbing now, her hand over her mouth. "I don't have a company, Sophie," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't have a penthouse. I have this key, and I have a job, if you'll have me. The piano tuner for your school. I'm not very good at it yet." He looked up at her, the last king of New York, kneeling on a stage in Brooklyn, offering her nothing but himself. "I finally understand what take care of you means. It means
putting your heart in a safe place. Your heart, not mine. Please, Sophie, let me be your safe place. Will you marry me?" Sophie sank to her knees in front of him, her black dress pooling on the stage. She didn't say yes. She just grabbed the front of his t-shirt, pulled him to her, and kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion or of victory. It was a kiss of profound, staggering forgiveness, a kiss that said, "Welcome home." The crowd of kids, parents, and reporters from Brooklyn erupted. It was the loudest, most joyous applause the city had ever heard. The wedding was not in a ballroom. It was held 3 months later in the garden of the small stone cottage in the English Cotswolds, the garden Marcus had rebuilt. It was autumn. The roses were in their final defiant bloom. There were only 20 guests. Count Vescavi, who had flown in on his private jet, weeping openly. The kids from the Gilbert Smith Conservatory, who served at the choir. A few of the old letter staff, whom Marcus had personally rehired to manage the new foundation. Sophie wore a simple, vintage-style lace dress. Marcus wore a rumpled linen suit. He was, as Sophie had requested, the piano tuner. She walked down the aisle, a path of scattered rose petals, to the sound of the children's choir singing the Neapolitan folk song she had sung for Vescavi. When she reached the small flower-covered altar, Marcus didn't take her hand. He was sitting at a small, upright piano he had tuned himself. He looked at her, and he played. He played the opening chords of her song, "I'd Rather Go Blind." This time, his playing was perfect. Not technically perfect, but emotionally perfect. He had, in the last 3 months, learned to play the blues. He'd learned to play her soul. And then she did something he never expected. She turned to him, took the small bouquet from her hands, and gave it to one of the children. And she began to sing. She sang to him. "Something told me it was over when I saw you and her talking." She was reversing the curse. She was taking the song of her humiliation, Act 1, and turning it into a song of absolute devotion. She was singing about Amelia. She was singing about Jessica. She was telling him in front of the world that she would rather go blind than to ever see him walk away from her. Marcus Lutter, the man who had been terrified of being conned by a singer, openly wept as his bride sang her vows to him. When the song was over, they said the simple words. The I-dos were quiet, almost anticlimactic. The real vows had already been made. The party afterward was not a gala. It was a feast in the garden. The kids from the conservatory, high on English desserts, started an impromptu jazz session. Count Vescavi, 3 glasses of champagne in, tried to teach a teenager how to sing Verdi. Marcus and Sophie slipped away. They walked, hand in hand, to the small churchyard at the edge of the village. The sun was setting, casting a gold and purple light over the old headstones. They stopped at a new one, a simple, elegant granite stone that matched the one in New York. Gilbert Smith, beloved, grandfather, father, friend. His promise is kept. Sophie leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her hair, his chin resting on it. "Hi, Grandpa," she whispered. "We did it." "He knew," Marcus said, his voice quiet. "All along. He wasn't gambling. He knew." "He knew you were a good man," Sophie said, "trapped under a lot of armor." "He knew you," Marcus corrected, "were the only one who could get it off." They stood there for a long time, the sound of the party, of their kids laughing and playing music drifting over the fields. Their new life was very quiet. Marcus officially and happily worked for his wife. He was the chief financial officer, piano tuner, and janitor for the Gilbert Smith Conservatory, which, thanks to the massive anonymous endowment, was now the premier free music school in the country. They lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn, not a penthouse. They took the subway. They argued over what to have for dinner. On their first anniversary, Sophie came home to find Marcus in their living room, staring at a piece of mail.
It was a letter addressed to Marcus Lutter from a federal correctional facility. It was from Jessica. Sophie sat beside him. "You don't have to read it." He opened it. It was 1 page. "Mr. Lutter, they teach you a lot about atonement in here.
I'm not sorry for what I did. I believed I was right, but I was wrong. I saw a picture of you in the Post, carrying a keyboard into a subway station for one of your students. They called you a fallen billionaire. I've never seen you look so happy. I suppose I was protecting the wrong thing. Don't write back. J. Becker. Marcus folded the letter and put it away. That night, Sophie woke up around 2 a.m. The bed was empty. She panicked for a split second before she heard it. The sound of the piano. She walked downstairs. Marcus was at their old beat-up piano. He was working through a piece of music. It was complex, fast, and full of joy. "What's that?" she whispered from the doorway. He looked up, startled, and then smiled. It's something I wrote. It's not very good." "Let me hear it," she said, curling up on the sofa. He began to play. It wasn't a classical sonata. It wasn't a blues riff. It was them. It was a song that started with a low, angry, dissonant chord, moved into a tense, complex harmony, shattered into 1,000 painful staccato notes, and then resolved into a melody that was so simple, so warm, and so breathtakingly beautiful, it made her cry. When he finished, she didn't applaud. "It's called The Promise," he said quietly. "It's perfect," she replied. "Now come to bed, Mr. Smith-Luter. You have a piano to tune in the morning." He laughed, closed the piano lid, and walked to his wife. The promise was kept. The redemption was complete. What did you think of Marcus and Sophie's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to keep up with all our stories. And don't forget to check out more heartwarming stories right here on the end screen.